In order to realize the true stature of Beckenbauer's personality, one mere fact perhaps will be enough. No one else in the history of the game was as successful in all three main capacities, as a player, head coach and functionary, and in the case of the great German, the word successful means the achievements of the highest order. To put it into perspective, let's imagine that Florentino Perez, the incumbent president of Real Madrid, in his distant youth was a footballer of Zinedine Zidane's caliber and then turned into the coach of Carlo Ancelotti's level before becoming the brilliant and extremely efficient executive, which he actually is. Sounds implausibly, isn't it? But Beckenbauer managed to accomplish it in practice. His accolades as a player and manager are well known, but very few remember that he is one of the most decorated presidents of Bayern, both in terms of the trophies that have been won in his tenure and the amount of time, 15 years, during which he held this post. 8 Bundesliga titles, 6 German Cups, plus the UEFA Cup and Champions League triumphs, along with the Intercontinental Cup, speaks for themselves, but arguably the most impressive thing is that in the mid-1990s, Beckenbauer completely changed the fortunes of the club, returning to Munich in the first half of the 1990s in the somewhat neutral role of vice-president. He found the Bavarian grandee in absolute disarray. Back at that time, even the best German footballers didn't consider the team as a pinnacle of their careers. The sporting results has been poor amid very small revenues, despite the presence of very skillful and enterprising general manager in Uli Hoeneß. It would be exaggeration to say that Franz turned things around overnight. It took about 3-4 years of thorough and competent work in order to elevate the status of Bayern to its classic heights. But in this particular case, the longevity of work just underlined the extreme difficulty of the task that can be successfully overcome only by a man of immense power, using his considerable political weight and numerous important connections in different areas. Beckenbauer found for the club new sponsors and partners, helped Bundesliga to sign a lucrative, in those days indeed, TV contract, and made Munich an attractive destination for the stars once again. As a result, if in 1993 the roster of Bayern looked forlornly if we compare it to the one of AC Milan, the benchmark in the European football for that era, by the summer of 1995, they were essentially on an equal footing in this sense. In those years, Beckenbauer, who in 1994 has been anonymously elected president of the club, laid the groundwork for the team that by the turn of the century was a huge force in the Champions League. Being an extremely authoritative figure in general, the Kaiser Franz, as he was commonly called, had also a pretty valuable asset in the form of membership in UEFA and FIFA, where he held various prestigious posts for decades. This fact favorably distinguished him from the likes of Silvio Berlusconi or Josep Núñez, two other mighty bosses of the big clubs in the 1990s. Using relationships within these organizations, predominantly in UEFA, the German often literally pushed through the interests of Bayern, especially with regards to expansion of the Champions League. It's hard to believe in it now, but the giant of Bundesliga missed 4 out of 5 first edition of the competition. With the enlargement of the number of participants, this issue has been solved. Since 1997, the perennial German champions haven't been able to qualify to the tournament only once, in 2007. It should be said that the fact that he never became the president of UEFA or FIFA very much reflects the level of Beckenbauer's charisma and credibility, in a positive way, being touted throughout the entire 1990s as a future heir of the very old Joao Vilange, who ruled and governed the world of football for a quarter of a century. The Kaiser Franz surely had enough political power and wealthy allies in order to assume this role. His individual qualities were very suitable for this job too, but the truth is that the German has never strived to be in charge of those organizations, possessing a lot of influence and money, and with no shortage of glory and popularity as well. He saw the role of FIFA or UEFA presidents more as a burden than as a source of prosperity or a way to fulfill his ambitions. Simply put, he could easily afford to not chase this post, unlike the other celebrity from the world of football in the form of Michel Platini, who despite his marquee name had neither a native club where he could work for years in a prestigious role, nor a profitable personal business, which the German enjoyed almost from the days of youth. As for the other prominent functionary, Sepp Blatter, for him, staying on top of the organization had even more importance. For the Swiss, it was almost a matter of life and death. While the unparalleled greatness of Pelé, a long-term good mate of Beckenbauer, by the way, could be partly explained and in a sense even magnified through his more than apparent lack of activity in the post-playing life, the Kaiser Franz presents the example of an opposite kind. Whereas the Brazilian managed to stay an iconic and revered figure without working in football in official capacity for decades after he retired, the German not only labored in all sorts of roles, but also excelled in each of it. Similarly to Platini, being the head of the World Cup organizing committee, he also was in charge of Germany's bid, while the Frenchman joined the project well after France won the right to host the tournament, which is a major difference. Graceful and intelligent on the pitch, where he seemed to make right decision in basically each episode, Beckenbauer smoothly transferred this uncanny knack to his other activities, and thus commanded genuine respect in every area he came in touch. Throughout decades, he enjoyed the reputation of a man who can handle the work whatever difficult and unattainable it initially looked, and he seemed always eventually came out on top, not only as a footballer and coach, but as a functionary, businessman and administrator too. Wise and charming man, the Kaiser Franz has been known as a great communicator. His English was almost as good as native German. Furthermore, he had a rare trait for such an outstanding person, self-criticism. It allowed him to leave each sphere exactly in the right moment. Moving from Bayern when the club was about to mire in crisis to the USA in 1977, he until recently, the transfers of Karim Benzema and Lionel Messi are fresh in the memory, was the last actual Ballon d'Or winner who left European football. At the same time, the German retired from the international football in the rank of world champion. Hence, he protected his legacy in the best possible way, and in the process significantly increased his capital, playing alongside Pelé for New York Cosmos. It is worth adding that Beckenbauer was one of the first football stars who had a manager. In contradistinction to his great rival on the field, in the 1970s they were inseparable at the top of various ratings, almost as much as Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo in the 2010s, and a good mate outside it, Johan Cruyff, who in 1978 lost effectively all his fortune becoming a victim of fraud, the Kaiser Franz was immeasurably more careful in this regard. Well-financed man, he was living in Austria since 1982 due to privileged taxes. Announcing his departure from the West Germany national side as a head coach on the eve of the World Cup 1990, Beckenbauer obviously had no crystal ball, but ultimately hit the bullseye, leaving as a winner. After several brief stints at the helm of Marseille and Bayern, he ended his managerial career, later thoughtfully stating that he noticed that he is losing motivation in this role, and it's better to stop before the others become aware of his state. Paradoxically enough, the constant and enormous success that accompanied the Kaiser Franz in essentially all his ventures quietly overshadowed his undeniable greatness as a footballer. Obviously, the time factor contributed as well. Suffice to say that even the role of sweeper itself, which was glorified by the German first and foremost, has died in the early 2000s. In addition to it, the footage of vast majority of Beckenbauer's club matches isn't available for obvious reasons, while the highlights of his game, which are based not on feints and goals, but on very high football IQ, are really appreciated only by the connoisseurs of the game. But they are in the absolute minority, of course, appearing with an enviable constancy on the TV screens throughout the whole 1990s and 2000s. The German unwittingly turned into somewhat a media person rather than a legendary footballer. As for the younger generations, they strictly associated him with the role of big boss. Beckenbauer has become a hostage to this image later, even to a greater extent, amid the corruption allegations, dodging the bidding process for the 2006 World Cup, while acknowledging that he went to the limit, trying to ensure that Germany will host the tournament, which actually happened. He strongly denied the fact that the votes of 4 members of FIFA's executive committee in 2000 have been purchased. Anyhow, the case evolved into a protracted court fight, which ended in a stalemate only relatively recently. In 2020, the trial was suspended because of the health crisis, and the statute of limitations has expired. Although he was effectively declared innocent, the case visibly damaged Franz's reputation. As for his ever-deteriorating health, the harm has been even stronger. His last years were marked by a reclusive way of life and went almost in an oblivion, and even after the death, despite numerous voices of praise and adoration, mainly in Germany, it was hard to shake off the thought that they should have resonated much more loudly, because we are talking about arguably the biggest figure in the history of European football.